Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today, we are opening up an incredible document, basically an ancient reporter's notebook. And we're diving straight into a question that, for the classical world, it was everything.
It really was.
When you strip away all the myths, all the boasting, can any nation actually prove it's the oldest on Earth?
That's the core question of identity, isn't it? Antiquity meant authority, and for these huge powers in the ancient world, settling that claim was just paramount. And the source material we have today it's phenomenal.
It really is.
We're looking at these incredibly detailed field notes from a traveler who was just so curious. He interviewed priests, he measured entire countries, he debunks theories.
That's right. And these aren't just travel logs, you know. They are detailed ethnographic reports, mostly focused on Egypt. Our whole mission here is to pull out the most surprising, the most insightful facts about Egyptian culture, its geography, its history, all from this one guide.
And we're treating it like we're just reviewing these field notes from the past, like we've just uncovered them.
Exactly. And we have to start with this story that, it sounds like a philosophical thought experiment, but it was apparently a real thing a king did to settle this exact question.
The ultimate test of a first language.
Okay, let's just zoom in on this moment. You have King Psammetichus, and he is absolutely driven to prove that Egypt is the first, the primordial culture. So he comes up with this radical plan.
It's unbelievable. He finds 2 newborn children, just infants from, common families, and he gives them to a shepherd. He essentially removes them from the human world.
The rules he lays down are just absolute, total isolation. The shepherd built a lonely hut for them. And this is the crucial part. He's forbidden from speaking a single word in their hearing. They can't learn any language.
None. His only job is to care for them physically and bring goats to the hut so the children can have milk. That's it.
Can you just imagine the silence in that hut? For 2 whole years, these children hear nothing but, I guess, the bleating of goats. And Psammetichus' theory was, pretty revolutionary.
It was.
He believed that if you deny a human a learned language, the first sounds they naturally make, beyond just baby noises, that must be the original innate language of all humankind.
And he was betting everything that language would be Egyptian.
It's this incredible high-stakes test of nature versus nurture, just conducted in total silence.
Yeah.
And then finally the payoff.
2 years go by.
2 years, the shepherd opens the door to the hut, just doing his daily duty.
And the 2 toddlers, who must have been just starved for any kind of interaction, they run towards him. And as they're reaching out their hands, the shepherd hears the sound, repeated clearly.
Begos.
Begos. He heard it again later, reported it to the king. Psammetichus came to hear it for himself. This was the big moment of discovery.
The sound was consistent. The children had spoken. But what language was it? What was this supposed original human tongue?
The investigation across Egypt turned up nothing. Nobody recognized the word.
So the king sends out messengers, far and wide, just trying to place this single word. And the discovery, when it finally comes, it just completely shatters the whole point of the experiment.
Because Begos wasn't Egyptian at all.
Not even close.
It was Phrygian, and it meant bread.
Bread. Just like that. Based on this spontaneous utterance of 2 isolated toddlers probably just crying for food, the Egyptians conceded.
They had to.
They'd claimed for centuries to be the oldest nation. But the king's own scientific experiment forced them to humble themselves and admit, no, the Phrygians were older.
And it's just the perfect way to open this traveler's report, isn't it? It immediately tells you that this source is all about investigation, about critical thinking, even if the results are shocking or go against what everyone believes.
So moving on from that,
Yeah.
that incredible story, let's set the stage a bit, politically and geographically. We're looking at Egypt at time of, some pretty severe external pressure.
Oh, absolutely. This is right after the death of the great Persian king, Cyrus. And the notes, they open by framing the immediate threat. Cambyses, who's the son of Cyrus, has inherited this enormous Persian empire, and he is actively, right now, preparing a military expedition aimed squarely at Egypt.
And the traveler's description of Cambyses' mindset is, it's pretty key to understand what's coming, right?
It's chilling. He didn't see the Greeks, the Ionians and Aeolians as allies or even just subjects.
No.
He viewed them as slaves inherited from his father.
Wow.
It's a profoundly dehumanizing way to look at people. It means these populations were basically just property, chattel passed down through the family. It sets a very clear, very dark tone for what Persian rule is like.
And what might happen to Egypt if they fall.
Exactly. But then the reporter just immediately pivots from that immediate threat to the deep, deep past. He brings up the very first human king of Egypt, a figure named Min.
Min is a huge figure in their foundation stories, right? Credited with building Memphis, maybe even diverting the Nile.
He is, but the notes add this geological perspective that really undercuts the idea of the land itself being ancient.
How so?
Well, the traveler notes that back in Min's time, almost all of Egypt, except for the high ground in the Thebaid province, was just a marsh.
Just a swamp.
Basically, the implication is staggering. It means that Lower Egypt, the very part of the country most outsiders thought of as Egypt, it didn't really exist yet. It had to be physically built up by the river over thousands of years.
So you have this tension right away. Ancient people, maybe, but brand new land. But before we get into that whole geographic debate, we have to talk about this stunning internal conflict, the revolt of the 240,000 deserters.
Under King Psammetichus, the same king from the Bekos story.
Right.
This is a really remarkable scene of mass defiance. Psammetichus had these huge garrisons at 3 critical frontier posts.
Elephantine in the south, Daphne facing Arabia and Assyria, and Maria facing Libya.
Right. These were the security pillars of the entire nation.
And the soldiers, 250,000 men of fighting age, an army in themselves, they were done.
Completely exhausted. The notes are very clear. They had been garrisoned for 3 years straight without any relief. Far from home, they felt forgotten, neglected.
And the breaking point comes. They just decide, all at once, to mutiny.
En masse. They pack up, make a common cause, and just start marching south into Ethiopia. This isn't just a few guys deserting. It's a massive, self-organized exodus of nearly 250,000 armed men.
The king, he must have panicked. He knows this is a catastrophic loss.
Yeah.
So he pursues them.
You can just picture this scene, right? The king riding after them, pleading, trying to appeal to their sense of duty, of tradition. He begs them, do not desert your gods, your children, and your wives.
And this is where we get just this ultimate act of defiance. The notes record what one of the soldiers said in reply. It's so raw, so physical.
He pointed very explicitly to his manly part, to his genitals, and he just declared that wherever that should be, they would find wives and children.
That is an all-time mic drop moment.
It really is.
They are essentially declaring total independence from the state's whole definition of home and family. They're saying, we carry our own future. You neglected us, and now you've lost us forever.
And the consequences are immediate. They leave Egypt, they go to the Ethiopian king, who, is smart enough to recognize the value of this force.
Okay.
He gives them land by conquering and displacing some other Ethiopians. And the report closes with this interesting note that these Egyptian defectors adopted Egyptian customs and have become milder-mannered by intermixture with the Egyptians.
So this one revolt created this brand new, complex military and cultural hybrid state right on Egypt's southern border, all because of military fatigue.
A huge shift, and it provides the backdrop for the reporter's next big topic. What even is Egypt? Starting with their calendar, which was remarkably sophisticated.
Traveler calls it a juster reckoning than the Greek system. The Greeks were always having to add an extra month every other year to stop the seasons from drifting.
Which must have been a mess for farming and festivals. But the Egyptian system, it was so elegant, it must have come from intense observation of the stars.
So what was it?
12 months, 30 days each, and then they just added 5 extra days at the end of the year.
That's it.
That's it. That simple fix made sure the complete circle of seasons always lined up with their calendar. It just shows this level of applied science that really impressed the traveler.
But that precision with time just leads right back to the big debate about the land. Was Egypt an ancient land, or was it, as he says, land acquired, a gift from the river?
This is the core geological argument. The delta, Lower Egypt, was demonstrably new land, just alluvial soil created by the Nile depositing silt year after year.
And he offers physical proof.
He does. He says if you sail a day's run out from the coast, you can drop a sounding line and still bring up river mud from 11 fathoms deep. The river is constantly building Egypt out into the sea.
This evidence was at the heart of the intellectual debate with the Ionians. The traveler mentions figures like Herodotus, who had this really narrow definition of Egypt.
For the Ionians, Egypt was only the delta, that little triangle of land from the watchtower of Perseus to Pelusium, and inland only as far as Chersonesus, where the Nile splits.
And if that tiny new patch of mud was the only true Egypt, how could they possibly claim to be the oldest people on Earth?
Exactly. But our traveler rejects this. He says that's way too limited. It's a purely physical definition. He argues the real measure isn't the mud, it's the people.
So his conclusion is much broader.
Much. For him, Egypt is all the country inhabited by Egyptians, starting from the first cataracts at Elephantine and stretching all the way to the sea.
And he finds confirmation for this definition not from a map, but from religious law, from the Oracle of Ammon.
Yes, this wonderful little story about the men from Maria and Apis. They lived near the Libyan border, and maybe because of that, they really disliked the Egyptian religious law against eating cow's flesh.
So they go to the famous Oracle of Ammon.
And they ask for permission to eat everything. They're basically asking, can we stop being culturally Egyptian?
And what did the god say?
The oracle flatly forbade them, and it stated that all the land watered by the Nile below Elephantine, and this is the key phrase, all who drink of that river's water were Egyptians.
Wow. Let's just linger on that. The definition of their nationhood, their citizenship, was tied to what you might call hydrological destiny.
That's a great way to put it.
It wasn't about ethnicity or political borders. It was about drinking the water.
Exactly. It's almost a kind of environmental determinism. If the Nile sustains you, if you drink from the source that gives this place life, then you are bound by its laws and its customs. It's an incredibly sophisticated concept of what it means to belong.
So, having defined Egypt as the land of the river, the ancient reporter then starts to meticulously measure the sheer scale of the place using their unit of measurement, the sconas.
Right, and he's all about precision. The sconas was 60 furlongs, and this let him create this really impressive mental map for his audience. The numbers he records are just amazing.
So let's start with the coastline.
The coastline, from the Plynthinic Gulf to the Serbonian Marsh, he measures it at 60 sconi, which is 3,600 furlongs, so that's the width.
And then the length.
Vertically, the journey inland from the sea just to get to Heliopolis is 1,485 furlongs. And he's careful to make this relatable, you know?
Yeah.
He says it's about the same distance as from the altar of the 12 gods in Athens to the temple of Zeus at Pisa.
Which is a huge distance just to get to one major city.
A massive journey. And then above Heliopolis, the geography just tightens up completely. It becomes this narrow ribbon of green, just life, squeezed between two huge barren mountain ranges.
On one side, the Arabian Mountains, which is where they got the stone for the pyramids.
And on the other, the Libyan range. At its narrowest point, the traveler says there's barely 200 furlongs between the two. The concentration of life along that river must have been incredible to see.
And the final leg of the journey, up to the heart of the kingdom.
The boat trip from Heliopolis to Thebes is cataloged as a 9-day journey. That's 4,860 furlongs, or 81 sconi.
So the grand total.
The total distance from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Thebes is precisely 6,120 furlongs. This level of detail, it just confirms he had access to official records, official guides.
But all this precision about the land just made the central puzzle even more frustrating for the ancient world.
Yeah.
The behavior of the Nile itself.
The Nile just defied everything they knew about rivers. Every other river they knew swelled in the winter from rain and snowmelt. The Nile did the opposite.
It rose in flood for exactly 100 days, starting right around the summer solstice, and then it sank for the entire winter. It was completely backward.
And there's a second related mystery. The traveler was really perplexed that no airs blow from it as from every other stream. The river was huge, but it didn't seem to generate those cold, damp breezes you'd expect from a big body of water.
This mystery just drove the Greek thinkers crazy, and they came up with all these theories, which our traveler felt he had to just systematically take apart.
He really did.
So let's start with a theory about the Etesian winds.
The idea here was that these strong annual winds from the northwest, which blow in the summer, were physically holding the Nile back from flowing into the sea, so the water would just build up and flood the interior.
And he dismisses this pretty logically.
Very logically. First, he says, well, the Etesian winds don't blow constantly, but the Nile floods on a very regular schedule. And second, and this is the killer argument, if the wind was the cause, then other rivers that flow against those same winds would also get dammed up, and they don't.
Okay, so that's out. The second theory, the one linking the Nile to the mythical ocean, that one gets dispatched even faster.
Yeah, he just dismisses that as grounded in obscurity. For a rigorous investigator like him, theories that come from poetry, which he thinks Homer probably just invented, that's not knowledge. The ocean was an idea, not a geographical fact, so it's useless for explaining a real phenomenon.
The third theory was the most intuitive one, though, and the one he spends the most time debunking, that the Nile was flooding because of melting snow.
And he has three really compelling proofs against this idea. First, the origin. The Nile flows from the hottest region, Libya and Ethiopia, towards the colder coast. Snow simply cannot exist, let alone be a major source in the hottest climate on Earth.
And the second proof is about rain, right?
Right. The source region doesn't have rain or frost, and the traveler has this key meteorological insight. After snow has fallen, there must needs be rain within 5 days. Since the locals report no rain or frost, there can't be a big snow source.
And a third proof is just pure observation of life in that region.
He says, look, if the source region was cold and snowy, the life that exists there couldn't possibly survive. The people there are black because of the scorching heat, and migratory birds, cranes, swallows, they go there for the winter to escape the cold of Scythia.
So the heat, the black population, the birds, all of it makes a snow source totally impossible.
Completely. So having just cleared the field of everyone else's theories, he proposes his own. And it is remarkably complex. It's all about the annual path of the sun and the physics of evaporation.
This is really the height of his analytical skill.
It is. He suggests that during the winter, the sun is driven south by storms, and its path takes it directly over the inland parts of Libya, which are always clear and hot.
But wait, that seems backward. Why would the sun moving south make the river drop?
Because the sun is a giant engine of evaporation. When it's directly over that region in the winter, it's just sucking up the maximum amount of water vapor from the Nile and its sources. This intense solar pull causes the Nile to fall short during the winter.
So winter is the time of maximum water loss because the sun is right overhead.
Exactly. Then, when summer comes, the sun moves back to the middle of the sky. Now it's drawing water equally from all rivers. But all those other rivers are already low. The Nile, on the other hand, which was so severely depleted by the sun's winter passage, now experiences its greatest relative rise.
It's a deficit and return model based entirely on solar paths and atmospheric physics. It explains both the weird flood cycle and the lack of cold air.
Yes, the lack of cold air, he says, is because cold air only comes from things that are very cold. And the region the Nile flows through is so intensely hot because the sun burns its passage through it that it just can't generate cold air. It's a complete unified theory.
But a theory is one thing. Actually finding the physical source is another. And the notes are full of these fascinating, sometimes mythical attempts to find the springs, like the story of Crophi and Mophi.
Ah, this one is fantastic. It came from the sacred treasurer at Sais. He claimed the Nile springs rose up between two sharp-peaked hills, Crophi and Mophi, near Elephantine.
And the water supposedly flowed both north to Egypt and south to Ethiopia from this single shared bottomless source.
And again, it reminds you of the Beko story. Psammaticus, always the scientist, tried to measure the spring's depth.
On another failed experiment.
The treasurer claimed the king had a rope woven of many 1,000 fathoms length and had it let down into the spring. And he couldn't find the bottom.
Our reporter, though, he remains a skeptic. He offers a rational explanation for why the king failed.
He does. He suggests that strong eddies and an upward rush of water against the hills would just prevent the sounding line from ever reaching the real bottom, even if it wasn't infinitely deep.
The physical journey beyond Elephantine is described as just incredibly difficult.
Almost impossible. To get past the first 12 sconi, which is a 4-day trek, boats have to be roped on both sides as men harness an ox, because the current is so strong and winding.
And then there's this huge land journey, followed by another boat trip to the great city of Meroe.
40 days of land travel. Then another 12 days by boat to reach Meroe, the capital of Ethiopia. And Meroe is described as this great religious center where the people worship only Zeus, who they call Amun, and Dionysus, who they call Osiris.
And they rely on the oracle of Zeus for everything.
For all their big decisions, especially military ones. But maybe the most compelling story about the source comes from a different king, King Etearchus of the Ammonians. The tale of the Nasamonian expedition.
It sounds like a real adventure story.
It is. 5 proud and violent youths from a Libyan people called the Nasamones. They decide on a whim to travel west into the unknown desert beyond the edge of the map.
They cross the inhabited coast, then the part with wild beasts, and then finally just The vast, waterless desert. They're in a complete vacuum of human knowledge.
After days of grueling travel, they see a plain with trees and are suddenly met by little men of stature smaller than common and black. These men speak a language they don't understand, but they lead the adventurers away across these huge marshes.
And eventually they reach a city next to a great river. And what were the key features of this river?
It flowed from the west towards the rising sun, the opposite direction of the Nile in Egypt, and it was full of crocodiles.
The crocodiles.
Here you
That's
come.
the key, the common link.
It is. King Neterchus reasonably guessed that this river, even though it was flowing the wrong way, was actually the Nile, just on its deep, unexplored inland course.
And the ancient reporter tries to synthesize this by imposing this kind of macro-geographical symmetry on the world.
He does. He suggests that the Nile flows through Libya, just like the the Danube River flows through Europe, and he thinks that both of these massive rivers might rise from the same measure of distance.
So he's trying to organize the world's continents by mirroring their great rivers. But despite all the measurements, all the theories, all the thrilling expeditions, the ultimate source of the Nile remained. Well, it remained a mystery. He gave us the most detailed map of his time, but the starting point was still missing. We're going to transition now from the land of the Nile to the people of the Nile. And the traveler spends so much time detailing Egyptian customs, often framing them with this idea that they are contrary for the most part to those of all other men. It is truly a world turned upside down.
He really sees this contrariness as a deliberate choice, not an accident. It's how they define themselves, through opposition.
Let's start with the role reversals in daily life.
Women go to the marketplace, they buy and sell, they handle commerce. Meanwhile, the men stay at home and weave.
And even in the act of weaving, they're contrary.
Yes, where everyone else pushes the woof thread upwards, the Egyptians push it downwards.
Physical burdens, too, they're reversed. Men carry burdens on their heads, women on their shoulders, and even basic bodily functions follow these contrary rules.
They do. Women make water standing, men sit. But they offer this clear philosophical reason for these seemingly random differences, especially about where they do certain things.
They eat outside in the streets, but they relieve themselves indoors. What was the thinking there?
The rationale was all about propriety. Things that are unseemly but necessary, like relieving yourself, should be done in secret, indoors. But things that aren't unseemly, like eating, can and should be done openly in public.
So they had this whole organized moral system built on philosophical ideas, not just random difference.
Exactly. And then there's the dietary difference, which would have been absolutely shocking to the Greeks, who loved their wheat and barley.
They considered it the greatest disgrace to eat food made from those grains. Their staple was this coarse grain called spelt.
And you have to wonder why, right? It probably has to do with purity laws, or maybe identifying wheat and barley as the food of foreigners, of invaders. Spelt, being native and coarse, stayed as the proper food for a true Egyptian.
And their food prep methods are just as contrary.
They knead dough with their feet, using the lowest part of the body for what should be a clean process. They gather mud and dung, an unclean process, with their hands. They're just systematically reversing the perceived cleanliness of every action.
And we see this even in the rituals around death and mourning.
The priests are hyper clean, always shaven, but when they mourn the dead, they let their hair and beard grow long.
Which is the exact opposite of the Greeks, who would shave their heads as a sign of mourning.
Precisely. The traveler does note one shared social custom, which is rare.
What's that?
They share this one thing with the Lacedaemonians. Younger men turn aside and give place to their elders, showing respect for age. But then they have this totally unique salute. People greet each other by lowering their hand to their knee. These little details just bring their daily life into focus.
And underlying all of this is this beyond measure religiosity that demands this intensive discipline and extreme cleanliness, especially from the priests.
The discipline is just astonishing. To prevent any kind of foulness or parasites during a divine service, priests shave their entire bodies every other day. They only wear linen clothes and papyrus sandals, no wool, ever in the temples.
And the watching schedule is intense.
Twice a day and twice every night they have to watch in cold water. But, this sacrifice is very well rewarded.
They were totally taken care of by the state, weren't they?
Completely. They get a huge stipend of flesh of beeves and geese in great abundance, and they get grape wine. They never have to spend their own money on food. But on the other hand, they are strictly forbidden from eating fish, and they absolutely cannot stand beans, which they see as an unclean food.
It sounds like a fully organized, state-sponsored religious and health system. And speaking of organization, The notes detail their system of medical specialization.
This is a truly fascinating snapshot of an early organized healthcare system. The traveler notes this highly unusual division of labor. Physicians specialize in one disease and no more.
So you have eye doctors, teeth doctors.
Yes, physicians for the eye, for the teeth, for the belly, or for what he calls hidden internal diseases.
That level of focused specialization is centuries ahead of its time. You could almost call it the first specialization model, like an ancient HMO, where experts only focus on their one specific organ system.
It just speaks to the extreme value they placed on expertise and the kind of institutional organization needed to manage a population's health like that.
But the customs could also be profoundly sobering. The ritual at rich men's banquets, this sudden confrontation with mortality, it's arresting.
Imagine it. You're at this grand feast celebrating life and wealth, and after dinner is over, a servant brings out a wooden effigy, a carved and painted image of a corpse in a coffin. And this memento mori is passed around to every single guest.
And what's the chilling moral lesson that comes with it?
The servant says to each one, "Drink and make merry, but look on this, for such shalt thou be when thou art dead." It's the ultimate leveler. It forces everyone there, no matter their rank, to confront the fact that life is short and death is coming.
It turns a party into this profound philosophical reflection.
It does. And finally, the communal mourning rites are highly visible. When someone important dies, the women of the house immediately cover their faces and heads with mud. Then they roam the city lamenting, with their clothes girt up and their breasts showing. It's a very public, very physical display of grief that the men mirror as well.
Let's dig deeper into their faith now, starting with the rules around sacrifice. They are so meticulous, they're almost terrifyingly strict.
The bull is the ultimate sacred animal, dedicated to Apophis, or Apis. And before any sacrifice, a special priest has to conduct this intense purity test.
And purity is everything.
Absolute. If the bull has even one single black hair, it's considered impure and you can't offer it.
And the checks are almost forensic, aren't they? They go into the animal's biology.
They do. The priest checks the tongue for certain signs. He checks the tail hair to make sure it grows naturally. If the bull passes, the priest wraps a papyrus around its horns, seals it with clay, and stamps it with his personal ring. That marks it as fit for the altar.
And the punishment for getting this wrong is extreme.
Sacrificing a bull that hasn't been properly marked is a capital crime. The purity of the offering is literally a matter of life and death for the person making the sacrifice.
After the sacrifice, the most macabre part happens. This curse ritual over the severed head.
The head is cut off, and the most powerful curses are spoken over it. They wish that whatever evil is threatening the sacrificers, or all of Egypt, will fall upon that head instead.
And once it's cursed,
It's either sold to Greek traders, or if there are no Greeks around, it's thrown into the river.
and this ritual explains a universal Egyptian custom.
It explains why no Egyptian will ever eat the head of any animal. It's literally seen as containing all the potential evil and curses of the world.
The notes also detail a specific ritual for the greatest goddess, who is identified as Isis or Demeter. And this is a very elaborate process.
After the bull is flayed, they take out the stomach, but they leave the entrails and the fat inside. Then the body cavity is filled with this mixture of incredibly valuable things: purebred, honey, raisins, figs, frankincense, and myrrh.
And they burn this whole richly stuffed carcass with oil. Then there's this intense period of public lamentation, and finally they feast on what's left. It's this whole structured spiritual journey.
Wealth, destruction, grief, and then communion. And the deep reverence for the cow is also explained here. Cows are sacred to Isis, who is often pictured with horns, and they are never sacrificed. If a cow dies naturally, its body is ritually cast into the river.
But bulls are buried.
Bulls are buried in the suburbs with their horns left uncovered like a visible marker.
And the religious distinctions get even more specific, right?
Huh?
Especially with goats and sheep.
Thebans, who worship Zeus, or Amun, they sacrifice goats, but they forbid sheep. That's because their tradition says that Zeus once showed himself to Heracles while wearing a ram's fleece.
But the Mendesians are the opposite.
The complete opposite. They worship Pan, or Mendes, and they sacrifice sheep, but they hold goats as sacred. So the holiness of an animal depended entirely on the local god and their specific mythology.
And the traveler uses these deep historical findings to argue, pretty forcefully, that a lot of Greek gods, including Heracles, actually came from Egypt.
He is insistent about this. He says the name of Heracles came from Egypt to Greece, not the other way around, and his evidence is all chronological. Heracles is listed as one of the 12 ancient Egyptian gods, and their timeline places his origins an incredible 17,000 years before the reign of King Amasis.
And to check this, the traveler did his own investigation. He sailed to Tyre in Phoenicia.
He did. He talked to the priests at the temple of Heracles there, and they told him their temple was 2,300 years old. This just confirmed his argument. The worship of the god Heracles was centuries older than the Greek mythological figure Heracles, son of Amphitryon.
And this timeline allows him to directly debunk a widespread and, in his view, pretty silly Greek myth about their hero.
Yes, the story that when the Greek hero Heracles came to Egypt, the Egyptians grabbed him and tried to sacrifice him to Zeus, but he broke free and killed them all.
The traveler says this is just impossible for two basic cultural reasons.
1. Egyptians do not sacrifice men. And 2. One single mortal man could not possibly have killed a countless multitude all by himself.
It's a perfect example of him just using cultural facts to dismantle dramatic fiction.
And he does the same thing with the story of how the Greek oracles at Dodona and Ammon got started.
The Theban priests had a very human, down-to-earth explanation.
They said 2 of their priestesses were kidnapped by Phoenicians and sold. One ended up in Libya and founded the Oracle of Ammon, and the other in Greece, where she founded the Oracle of Dodona.
But the priestesses at Dodona had their own mythical story, that 2 black doves flew from Thebes to found the oracles, and our reporter just synthesizes these 2 stories beautifully.
He suggests that the doves weren't birds at all. They were just women whose foreign Egyptian language sounded like the cooing of birds to the local Greeks.
And the detail that the doves were black just meant that the women were Egyptian.
Exactly. It's this remarkable piece of rational myth-busting. He shows how a literal historical event, foreign women speaking a strange language, gets turned into this highly symbolic bird legend over time.
Moving to the animal kingdom, we have to discuss the sacred and feared animals, starting with the system of animal guardians. This reveals just how deeply animal welfare was integrated into their society.
It's profound. Men and women were specifically appointed as guardians for each type of animal, cats, dogs, crocodiles, to make sure they were fed. And people fulfilling a vow would shave their children's heads, either partially or fully, and weigh the hair against silver.
And that silver, the exact weight of the child's hair, was given to the guardians to buy fish to feed the sacred animals.
And the punishments for harming these animals were, again, capital. Killing any sacred animal on purpose meant death. But for an ibis or a hawk, which were maybe seen as symbols of the divine, killing one meant death, whether you did it on purpose or by accident.
The cat gets a special focus. The mourning rituals are so intense.
When a cat dies a natural death, the entire household shaves their eyebrows, and nothing more, as a sign of grief. The traveler also notes this strange behavioral detail. He says male cats sometimes kill their own kittens to make the females want to mate again because they're creatures that love offspring and want to have more.
But the most shocking scene he describes involves a house fire.
When a fire breaks out, he says the sight is just incredible. The Egyptians surround the fire, but they're more focused on saving the cats than on putting out the flames.
Yeah, the cats.
He says the cats slip through or leap over the men and spring into the fire. And when this happens, there is great mourning in Egypt. The religious dedication to the cats was more important than saving their own property.
Let's turn to the Nile's most famous resident, the crocodile. The traveler gives this detailed and often unique biological description.
It's very rigorous observation. He says the crocodile eats nothing for the 4 winter months. It lays its eggs on land but sleeps in the warmer river. It starts small. The eggs are only the size of goose eggs, but it grows to 17 cubits or more.
And he notes some very specific physical traits, including how the jaw moves.
He claims it's the only animal that moves only its upper jaw, bringing it down on the lower jaw. He also says it has eyes like a pig's and no tongue. It's blind in the water, but has keen sight in the air.
Now, here's where we have to sort of push back on the ancient source, right? Because we know now that the idea that the crocodile only moves its upper jaw is a major misobservation.
It is, and it highlights the difficulty of ancient reporting. The reality is that a crocodile's lower jaw is set so far back that the movement of the upper jaw is just dramatically more visible. It's an optical illusion that he recorded as a scientific fact.
He also details the crocodile's unusual dental situation, which leads to this surprising symbiotic relationship.
The crocodile's mouth, he says, is full of leeches. So when it comes ashore and opens its mouth, this little bird, the sandpiper, goes inside the open jaws to eat the leeches.
And the crocodile never harms the bird.
Never. It's pleased with the service. It's a perfect report of a natural ecosystem in action.
And finally, the unique method for hunting crocodiles is described in detail. It needs three things.
First, a hook baited with pork. Second, the hunter waits on the bank with a live piglet. He beats the piglet to make it squeal, which lures the crocodile to the bait. And once the croc is hooked and pulled ashore, there's one crucial, masterful step.
What's that?
The hunter quickly smears mud over its eyes. Once it's blinded, the creature is very easily mastered.
It's fascinating how this mix of detailed observation and pure lore extends even to the legendary phoenix.
The traveler admits he's never actually seen one, only pictures. It's said to come to Egypt only once every 500 years when its father dies. He describes it as the size and shape of an eagle, with plumage that's partly gold and mostly red.
And its ritual is the stuff of legend.
It supposedly comes from Arabia, carrying its dead father. It first molds an egg of myrrh, then hollows it out, places its father inside, and this is the key. Fills the hollow with more myrrh until it matches the original weight exactly.
And this myrrh egg is then carried to the Temple of the Sun for burial.
It's this precise, chemical, ritualistic act of filial duty, even for a mythical creature.
We have to conclude with the ultimate Egyptian ritual. The process of embalming and protecting the dead, which was managed by a whole class of specialized craftsmen.
The embalmers offered 3 different grades of service. The most costly, a middle option, and the least costly, so they could cater to the wealth of the family.
Let's detail that most expensive method. It's incredibly invasive and intricate.
First, they draw out part of the brain through the nostrils with a thin iron hook. Then, they make a precise cut in the flank with a sharp knife made of Ethiopian stone. They remove all the intestines, and they clean the abdominal cavity with palm wine and bruised spices.
And then the cavity is filled. And the specific spices here are important.
They fill it with ground myrrh, cassia, and other spices, but explicitly no frankincense. Myrrh and cassia were powerful preservatives. The fact that frankincense is absent, which is probably the most revered resin, suggests it was saved only for the gods, not for human bodies.
And then the body is concealed in saltpeter for a very specific amount of time.
Exactly 70 days, no more. After it's washed, the body is wrapped in fine linen bandages sealed with gum, placed in a hollow wooden figure, and then set upright in a coffin chamber.
The middle way, though, it avoids the cut and uses oil instead.
Right. This method involved injecting cedar oil through the anus without removing the intestines. The oil would dissolve the inner parts. After the 70 days were up, the oil was released, and it would bring all the dissolved insides out with it, leaving only skin and bone. Much cheaper, much less invasive.
And finally, there's this fascinating rule in place to protect the dignity of dead women.
The wives of important men and beautiful women are not given to the embalmers right away. They're held for 3 or 4 days after they die.
And why was that?
This rule was put in place to stop the embalmers from having intercourse with them, and this was confirmed by an anecdote that involved a workman being caught and then denounced by his own colleagues. It's a really sobering note on the realities of this specialized labor and the lengths they had to go to protect the dead.
We have now completed our deep dive into these just astonishingly detailed field notes on Egypt. And 2 overwhelming impressions really stand out, both about the society and about the ancient reporter who studied it.
First, the intense, organized system of Egyptian life. Everything from their geography and their customs to their religion is so meticulously structured, often in direct opposition to the habits of everyone else.
Their dedication to defining themselves by being contrary weaving downwards, men sitting to make water, it seems like a fundamental pillar of their whole national identity.
They are a civilization built on highly specialized, compartmentalized knowledge. You see it in the medical specialization, the 3-tiered system of embalming, the forensic purity test for a sacrificial bull. Every single piece of their world had its place and its rule.
The second really striking aspect is their relentless, almost methodical pursuit of definitive knowledge, of the ultimate origin of things, even when that knowledge turns out to be elusive or even humbling.
They were willing to trust the random word of 2 infants in the Bekos experiment over thousands of years of tradition just to find their true national origin. They desperately needed to know why the Nile flooded, and they came up with these incredibly sophisticated astronomical theories when the actual source was just beyond their sight.
The Nile itself really symbolizes that tension perfectly, doesn't it? They measured their entire country by the sconus and the furlong. They logged the distance from the sea to Thebes with this amazing precision, 6,120 furlongs. They knew the exact length of the land the river created.
But the true source of the water that gave them their entire world, that remained hidden. An unfathomed spring, somewhere beyond the cataracts and the great marshes.
That relentless search for a definitive answer, the ultimate origin of their people or the ultimate origin of their great river, that's perhaps the deepest dive of all. And it's a search that continued for millennia, long after these notes were first taken.
A truly profound thought to end on.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the customs, the conflicts, and the cartography of ancient Egypt. Until next time.